see football looks like even 9 hours before kickoff.
In the last few years that I've had the opportunity to cover Talladega, I've come to learn from the drivers it's very much a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
Charles, why don't you tell them why we're going to Tuscaloosa?
We're going to go and spend a little time with Coach Saban.
SEC Nation crew about to get freaked out here in this Warehouse 31.
All right, Coach, I want to start this thing off right. Now, you played defensive back at Kent State in college.
Right.
Now, if you could play college football this day and age, go out and play on that football field on Saturday, and you were your own creator, you got to pick your physique, your skill set, what position would you want to play and why?
Johnson, a game time decision. What goes into assessing his status and health for this football game?
So Jatarvius, rumor on the street is that you can do a backflip as a former gymnast. I respect the backflip, but I have to see this for myself. My friends and everybody else always looked at me and my family and felt I was lucky.
As a freshman in college, she received a phone call from her dad that shook her to her core.
When I answered the phone, my dad was on the other side.
He said, "Dad, what's going on? Is everything okay?"
He sounded a little distressed, and
he said, "No."
I said, "Dad, what's wrong?" And
I said, "Dad, what's going on? Is everything okay?"
Hi, my name is Andrew Wells with Executive Lines, Living Life on Purpose.
And I'm Matt Wilson, and we sit down with successful people that also live a life of purpose. The goal of this show is to obviously highlight their successes, but also talk about the challenges that they've faced and the way that they've been able to overcome those things using faith as a guide.
And so we're here with Lauren Sisler. She is a national award-winning sports broadcaster who works as a sports reporter and a host at AL.com, where she covers a multitude of teams and sports in the state of Alabama. Now, she also works as a sideline reporter for ESPN and SEC Network, covering both football and gymnastics. She is very passionate about sports, but even more so passionate about telling the stories of the coaches, athletes, and the fans who make it more than a game. Lauren has a story of her own that she will be sharing with us today. In the aftermath of tragedy, she has set out to spread awareness while also providing us all with a message of hope, no matter the circumstances life throws your way. You don't want to miss it. Thank you, Lauren, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Nothing beats getting up in the morning and getting to come out and, share your story and just get out there and be part of the community.
That's awesome. So we definitely appreciate you being here. And so obviously sports reporting, that's a very exciting role. Was that something that you always wanted to become, or how did you get into that?
Well, sports reporting is something, I'll have to take you back, way back into the time machine, but it was something that became a new dream of mine in college when I kind of realized my ability to connect with people. I also grew up in a household that was sports was always on the TV. On Saturdays, it was always college football. On Sundays, it was NFL, it was NASCAR, and of course, that kind of bled into me a little bit. I also have a little bit of history in sports, as my triple great uncle, George Sisler, who played for the St. Louis Browns, gorgeous George, is got that Hall of Fame baseball blood in me. So,
nice.
Yeah.
So you fast-tracked your career. You're kind of a big deal. You're on the national stage now as a reporter, and I know that's kind of a really exciting endeavor, exciting thing that I think many reporters want to, get to. How did you move so fast in this career, especially in such a male-dominated world?
Well, it's a very interesting question because while a lot of people on the outside look at it as moving fast, I'm over here like, oh my gosh, when am I going to get there? When am I going to get there? But what I've realized in this entire journey of getting here is the fact that you have to enjoy the journey. And I think we forget about that a lot of times. And so now when I take a step back and reflect on how I got here, it just really amazes me. And so really it started when I graduated college. I went to several different local TV stations, really learned the foundation of television from the ground up. I'm talking rolling teleprompter at CNBC, so I did a little financial news there, and then went to my hometown station, was a photographer and editor where I covered news and sports. 1 minute I'm out covering a football game, the next I'm out, covering some sort of political campaign or a car accident. And so, I kind of ventured into that arena, and then as I started to get more reps and realize, okay, sports is my passion, this is definitely what I want to do, then I put a reel together, ended up in West Virginia, a very small town. Mm-hmm. Did that for 2 years, and then was essentially, we call it quote-unquote recruited to come here to Birmingham, Alabama, because like an athlete, you put together your best stuff. You put it on a real
You were
nowadays.
recruited to come back?
Recruited to come here to Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay.
Yep. So basically, being from Roanoke, Virginia,
Okay.
Kind of circled around, but ultimately came here to Birmingham, Alabama in 2011, and have been covering, sports here in the state. And what a better time than to now be covering sports here in the state of Alabama. I mean, you're at the pinnacle here between, what Nick Saban has put together in his time at Alabama, which just, it's crazy to me. And then over here you have Auburn, who has obviously been on a roller coaster but had some highs and lows. But of course you got to give love to UAB coming back from the death penalty, and then you have you have Sanford out here, Birmingham Southern, so many great schools, and obviously
Georgia Bulldogs right next door.
Georgia Bulldogs, that's right.
Doing great things.
Yes, that's right. But you just really have, there's such a heartbeat for sports here in this area, and then not to mention you have Talladega, you have the Honda Grand Prix of Alabama, which was over the weekend, and all sorts of great stuff. So doesn't go without being noticed.
It's obvious you love it.
Right. I do.
So who is obviously you get to interview some very cool people. Who's the best interview, and who's the most difficult to sit down with?
I get that question a lot. First of all, I'll go ahead and answer this question. I did get to interview Kirby a few times this past season in working for SEC Nation. And so just a little background on that. SEC Nation is the pregame show that is on SEC Network that we travel to all the different campuses around the SEC. And awesome experience. I'm working with Laura Rutledge, Tim Tebow, Marcus Spears, Paul Feinbaum, all an incredible crew. Great people, so much personality in that show. But getting to travel around and not only talk to the coaches here in the state, now suddenly I'm getting to branch out and really develop relationships with these coaches all over the SEC and really all over the country. But, I'll tell you this, Kirby Smart, it was interesting getting to know him more. Because when he's at Alabama, we're not allowed to talk to the assistants. So we don't really get to know them on that level. Very controlled. Yeah. So getting to talk to him, it was, you definitely see a lot of Nick Saban in him. But in talking to other people that have been around him and actually played football with him, you definitely see, he has his own philosophies and personality, but he definitely is driven by that process, and that can definitely be seen. But to answer that question, I would say Nick Saban was probably one of my first big interviews that I did about 4 years ago. I did a one-on-one with him when I worked over at CBS 42, and it was intimidating. He's very much by the book, and it's like, okay, you have 15 minutes to talk to him. You better stick to your time because he's a busy man and he has everything very regimented out. But once we got in the chair, at first it was very nerve-wracking, but then once we got in the chair, it was like, you start talking to him about family, you start talking to him about, various things of interest to him, and then, of course, you get right into football, and he's go, go, go. So I would say he would probably be one of the more intimidating ones for me, especially early in my career. But, now as you get more reps and you've been around it longer, sort of that intimidation falls. But one thing I will say is regardless in this business, and one thing I hope that I never lose, is that adrenaline that comes with being on television or being out on camera or in front of audiences. Because to me, that is like stepping out like I'm about to do my last floor routine in gymnastics. And so I think that's really cool to me because you have that adrenaline that goes. And so as soon as the red light goes, your heart starts pumping and you're like, okay, ready, go.
Oh, you still get that?
Yes. I do. So it will probably never go away, but that's a good thing.
Oh man, I've been working on trying to get it to go away.
I know. I mean, as much as people always say you don't want it to, it's definitely, to me, it's a blessing.
Keeps it fun.
It does keep it fun. And then one other person I'll jump on board with, Charles Barkley. Oh, so much fun. He's a good friend of mine, just somebody that comes to visit because, he went to Leeds High School, played basketball there before he went to Auburn. Great guy. I like to put a hashtag no filter beside his name, as you would expect. But great stories, just a great heart. You see him out in the limelight, and he's always cutting up. He's a funny guy, but honestly, he's a great person, has a great heart, and he's so giving, and just a wonderful person to be around.
So you made it, and I always think it's fast. I know we always think that it's never fast enough because I know in the business side we're like, just another dollar.
Yeah.
But we all know that we all have a lot of support. Usually we don't get to the top on our own. And we never feel like it's at the top, although everybody else thinks it is. Thinks we are. You know, what kind of support, or how important is support or those relationships around you as you're growing in your career?
Yeah, they're very important. And I think that's one thing that never should go unnoticed, is that every person that crosses your path, whether you believe that they're a part of that, they're very much a part of it. And obviously, growing up, my parents were always very supportive of me and my older brother, Alan. They were there for us through everything. They always gave us everything we needed to succeed, and it was always focus on your schoolwork, focus on your athletics, and we'll take care of the rest. And so they were a huge part of helping me to grow in that part of my life. And I would also say, my other family members, my Aunt Linda, my Uncle Mike, very much a big part of helping me to be successful and to where I am, and kind of driving me and pushing me to that next stop. Because I think a lot of times in life, first of all, nothing's guaranteed. But I think that, when you reflect on all the people that come together, and I think that's what makes this job so special to me, is because it's not only the wins and losses and the confetti that's falling on the field. To me, it's the people that make this job what it is. And so I think envy always comes to mind when people say, man, you get to stand on the sidelines, you get to interview, this person or that person. And yeah, that stuff is all great. But to me, it's the people. It's the stories we get to tell. It's the people that make up the wins and losses. It's what's behind the scenes. It's the people overcoming things. And, for me, I had my own story that kind of led me into that. So all the people that have been a big part of that, just my coaches and my teammates. Growing up when I was at Roanoke Academy, my coach Lisa Mason, she was just like a mom to me, a second mom. I'm on the road with her all the time. And then you have my coaches at Rutgers, my teammates, everybody was there. So I feel like everybody played a role, because everybody has a chapter in their life. And so you open one chapter, you close another, open one chapter. And I feel like you have these people that are really a big part of that along the way. And you never forget about that.
Well, I definitely think that, God's got a plan, no matter what you're walking through or where you are, God's definitely got a plan, and everything is a part of that. But sometimes when we're going through those challenges, it's very difficult for us to even fathom that it would be a part of his plan. And, so two of the key people that you just touched on as being, huge influences on you were taken from you at an early age. And just kind of walk us through, what happened, how that took place. And, obviously it's made you stronger because of it, but I know that could not have been easy to walk through that situation. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look back on things, you wonder why things happen, and there's always going to be questions. And for me, you hit the rewind button just to kind of paint this picture. I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, in what you would consider a middle-class suburban neighborhood, with my mom and dad and my older brother, Alan. And as far as we were concerned, we had it made growing up. Like I said, my parents were there for us, applauding us in our successes, there to pick us up when we were down, and really just gave us everything we ever needed to succeed. And so, I had my sights set on a gymnastics scholarship at an early age. When I got to about middle school is when I was like, this is my sport. I'd been doing it since I was 3. My parents were, very devoted to that sport as well. And I was like, this is an opportunity to give back to them, get a college scholarship, try to pay for some of my education after they had spent a lot of money getting me through the sport of gymnastics. But always so very supportive. And were they perfect? Absolutely not. We all know that nobody's perfect, and there's a lot of dysfunction everywhere we go, but that's what makes us human. And I think that's where we really have to lean on God and our faith to help, help in those instances. But for me, I get recruited by Rutgers. So I went to Rutgers University, which I proudly wear crimson on my sleeve. I say crimson. I just said crimson. I proudly wear scarlet on my sleeve. As I always make that joke, like I wear scarlet on my sleeve, not crimson. I always have to remind people this is scarlet. But nevertheless, for me personally, my goal was college scholarship. I want to be a sports doctor. So that's really my dream growing up. And here I go off to college. I'm 17 years old, and I feel like I have my whole entire life ahead of me. I'm living out my dream. I'm super excited about what's ahead of me. And, it was an adjustment. I'm going from Roanoke, Virginia, small town, to, the big city of New Brunswick. Very much of a culture shock. But I really felt like I, meshed well with my teammates, my coaches, and, just felt like I became part of this Rutgers family, and that became home for me. And here I am, it's freshman year, I get the semester, and in February my parents came to visit me at Rutgers, and it was awesome because they came to see me compete. Hadn't quite made the lineup, but I did my exhibition routine, and I just remember the excitement of them being there and seeing me finally compete and live out my dreams. And I felt like in that moment I'd made them so proud. Well, a month later, as I'm getting ready to go to bed, finishing up studying with my exams, I set an alarm clock and was talking to my roommate, and I go to sleep and I get a phone call, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember looking at the phone and seeing home on the phone, the caller ID, and I was like, this can't be good. So I answer the phone, and it's my dad on the other end, and he's like, Lauren, I need to talk to your brother. I need his phone number. And I said, well, Dad, what's wrong? And he's like, I just need to talk to your brother. And he was really frantic. And I said, Dad, what's wrong? And he said, Lauren, your mom died. And I was just like, what? Like, your mom died? Like, how is this even possible? Like, those words cut me like a knife. And I'm thinking to myself, this just can't be possible. Like, I'm still dreaming. So I remember frantically packing my bags. And, my father had said to me, he said, look, I got to take care of some things. Get on the next flight you can. I'll be at the airport to pick you up. And I remember that plane ride being like 2 hours, and it seemed like an eternity. And I jump off the plane. I go sprinting through the terminal. I grab my bags and run outside, and I'm looking everywhere for my dad, and he's nowhere to be found. And for me, it was like, okay, take a deep breath, like he's gonna be here. So I'm trying to call him on my phone, couldn't get him, and I'm like, he's probably just taking care of some stuff. And then next thing you know, my uncle and my cousin Justin pull up, and they jump out of the car, and it was very few words, just a lot of tears. And I'm thinking, okay, well, my dad's probably just taking care of stuff. Everything's gonna be okay. I'm gonna see him soon. And I get in the car and we start driving, and I finally worked up the courage to ask my Uncle Mike where my dad was. And he said, he actually had to pull the car over because, he had been driving, and said, Lauren, I'm sorry, but your dad's passed away too. And I remember thinking to myself, like, literally in a matter of hours, both of my parents gone like that. And I remember looking out the back seat of that car and thinking to myself, like I was losing control of life. Like, there's just no way this could possibly be happening. Like, wake me up, wake me up. And so what's crazy about it is there was no explanation at all for what took both of their lives in that moment. And there really wouldn't be an official explanation for 90 days until the autopsy reports came out. And what ultimately happened was they both overdosed from fentanyl, which is morphine in a patch. It's a time release. And both of them had been experiencing chronic pain, going to a pain management doctor in Roanoke, and were being prescribed very heavy narcotics. It started with Oxycontin, eventually led to fentanyl, which is 50 times more potent than any other drug on the market, any sort of narcotic and opiate. And never should they have been taking that. That's typically given to terminally ill patients. Neither of my parents were terminally ill. My mom had degenerative disc disease, had multiple surgeries in a 3-year period. My father had chronic back pain also that required surgery. He also suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder from his service in the Navy. And so all that combined, for those that don't know about addiction, it becomes very cyclical. And so ultimately they were consumed by addiction, and it was something where, in the world of addiction, there are functioning addicts. And my parents at the time were functioning addicts. They woke up, obviously would be in pain. Let me take this medication. Let me go to work. My dad was a biomedical engineer at the VA, went to work every day. Really never saw it. My mom was on disability, and I knew when she had a good day or bad day. But we never saw it. So as a family, we had so many questions, and even now, 15 years later, there's still very few answers to ultimately what led them down that path.
You didn't know what happened. 90 days happened. There was an autopsy report. But it was years before you really understood what really happened. Did you not want to know, or was it that you did know and you didn't want to just face it, or you just didn't ask the questions? Like, what was that process before the time that you finally understood what really happened? And how did you manage that time? And how did that affect you?
Well, that's a great question, because I think initially what happened, the walls went up. I put my own walls up, and I think my family helped kind of build those walls, because we all, first of all, didn't know what happened. And then as some of the details started to emerge, as the police reports and kind of what went on that evening that led up to the overdose for both my mother and father, I think, those things were starting to be laid out. But never did I look at a toxicology report. Never did I look at their death certificate, because to me, I was so fearful of what I was going to see, and I think seeing it in writing, to me, just kind of validated everything that I sort of thought might have been happening. But what's crazy is that I spent so long, and so many years, telling this story, this very sugar-coated story. My mom died of respiratory failure. Yes, she did. But I could never use the word overdose in that same sentence. And the reason for that is because I could never use the word addiction or overdose in the same sentence with my parents' name, because I was so ashamed of it. I was so ashamed, because I think in this world, before I knew what addiction was, my vision of an addict is a junkie living under a bridge. It's somebody, as we talked about earlier with track marks, somebody that uses drugs recreationally. I never perceived an addict to be my parents. They were, two people that I love very much on the outside. They were just like me and you, no different. And so I think that was the hardest part for me. And so as years went by, my Aunt Linda finally, I call her my Auntie Linda, who basically really stepped in, her and my uncle stepped in as my parents. I was 18, but I was clueless. I didn't even know how to write a check, because I had focused so much on schoolwork and gymnastics, and I still had a lot of growing up to do. But really what she did was she started to break those walls down. I mean, let me tell you, there was a lot of tension. She would start to talk about it. I'd get angry. I'd shut it down. No, I'm not listening. And it got to the point where I believed my own story so much. Like, okay, this is how my parents died. But what she helped me to realize is, like, Lauren, you can't change the opinions of others. You can't erase time. And you can't erase how they died. The best thing you can do now is move forward. Look back at the memories that you have of them and the good times. And, honestly, I think that lifted a weight off my shoulders. I hear people talk a lot as an addict. You get shackled to this addiction. You're shackled to the disease. I was shackled to the shame, personally. I was so shamed because I felt like their legacy was bound in my hands, and I couldn't talk about it and share that with people. My best friend growing up didn't know how my parents died until I came out and started talking about it about 7 years after they passed. 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, first of all, the enemy wants people to live in shame. He wants people to live with shame. He wants them to live with guilt. He wants them to live with fear. He wants people to, ultimately not be able to share struggles that they faced because of, that you're going to be judged, or, people are going to look at you differently, or, that there's no way that people will ever be able to accept whatever you've walked through. And it's, it's a complete lie. Because, we've had story after story of people on here. If you haven't seen the episode with Mike Bailey talking about the loss of his daughter, similar thing. It was overdose. And, I think the only thing worse than losing a child would be, losing a parent at an early age and having to walk through that, especially with, a tragedy that could have been prevented and it could have been... obviously if somebody had recognized the signs, tried to help them, just stem that crisis from taking place. But at the same time, here you are a child. You're 18 years old, but essentially it's still a child, and you're having to walk out this situation, this nightmare, and keep it to yourself. And that's even worse, to have to, keep this story bottled up inside, and the things that you had to carry around with you. I think that's for anybody out there that's facing, either addiction or that they've had a similar struggle. This is somebody who's not only walked through that, but you've come out stronger on the other side. So I applaud you for sharing the story, because I know that it had to be difficult to first face the truth yourself, and then to share that once you fully came to grips with that truth, to share it with other people, and now to take that pain and turn it into your purpose. I mean, that's what we like to highlight on this show, because that's what we're called to do. And that's why, he and I wanted to share the fact that we've all faced struggles. We've all had issues that we've had to deal with to get, if you've got any relative success whatsoever, it's not without struggle, it's in spite of struggle. And so, what would you tell the people that are out there that are facing those similar things, that think that nobody will understand, that that they just don't get it, nobody's been in their shoes? What would you say to those folks?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for your kind words, and it's greatly appreciated. I think what I would tell people, and the encouragement out there, there's two elements to it. Obviously, the addiction elements, there's the prevention side of it, but there's also hope and recovery. And so while addiction is a lifelong disease, while it's something that addicts will battle every single day, they can overcome it. I've been around so many great people. I actually volunteer with the Addiction Prevention Coalition, and Danny Malloy over there is a perfect example of somebody that is a walking example and really a mouthpiece for this thing, to allow people to realize there is hope. He's in and out of multiple rehabs, heroin addict, has had his own trials and tribulations, but now he's an advocate for it, and he has shown people that he can emerge from the ashes. I mean, he's practically homeless. He and his wife, they own a beautiful home now. They've emerged from it. They've come out on top. And I think I encourage people, first of all, to really reach deep within yourself, to essentially find, it's hard to recognize sometimes that you've got that problem, but to not be ashamed of it. And that's what I tell people, whether it's your story or it's somebody else, don't be ashamed to tell your story, because I feel like you can unlock, somebody else's prison. And that's kind of a quote that I've heard a lot as of late, and that you can really help somebody by sharing that story. So there's definitely ways to get help. Addiction Prevention Coalition, they do have a website. It's apcbham.org. There's a directory on there. So I just encourage people to go out and get the help that they need, because really you have to make that first choice. Your life is going to get no better until you make that first choice. I could have sat on the pity pot all day long and had a pity party for myself and said, you know what, I'm going to go down that road. I'm going to make these choices. But I've made a promise to myself long before I even knew my parents had a problem. Not going to drink and do drugs. I was faced with it so many times when I was in college, out of college. I used to be a DJ, former life. DJ Sisler. So I witnessed it all. I've seen it all. But to me, I take pride in my identity. And I think that that's where, addiction is a mental health issue. And that sometimes you got to get to the root of the problem. So whatever it takes to really dig deep under that surface and get all that out. We've all got a story. We've all got problems. We've all got dysfunction. And as we said before, we put people on a pedestal, and what we see on social media is we see everybody's best of. We don't see worst of, unless it's one of these websites that's showing,
Fails.
Yeah, epic fails. But that's what I encourage people. Don't be ashamed of it, because we're no different than anybody else. My parents, just because they were prescription drug addicts, were no different than the homeless man living under the bridge, because chances are he got there somehow. There's always hope in recovery. So I believe, I truly believe that, you really have to kind of evaluate yourself, find your identity and find your purpose, and don't be afraid to share it. Yeah, it took me 7 years. I kick myself sometimes. Why couldn't I have done it sooner? Maybe I could have helped more people. But I believe that was part of God's plan. God put me there. And honestly, when I lost both of my parents, I turned my back on God. I said, I'm going to do this on my own. I don't need anybody's help. And that was the worst thing I could have done. And so as I started to pick up the pieces and have everybody kind of rally behind me, I started to realize, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this thing, but you got to take control of your own destiny. Life happens, but there are choices that have to be made, and you can choose to be a survivor. And I feel like that's, everybody has that choice. And even if it's their second chance, third chance, fourth chance, whatever it is, I believe everybody deserves a good quality of life, no matter what.
Well, thank you. See, now I got this DJ Sisler. I kind of want to put it on the lower thirds.
Yeah, I know.
So
with some flames coming out of it.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. So no, your story is awesome. No, it's great because we get to hear. Yeah, you're right. Like, we always see people on a pedestal, or we see people's highlight reels, and we don't really know the dirt and everything that kind of made them, why, that made that highlight reel, the recipe that made that highlight reel. And so it's really great. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. It's very powerful. I mean, we got someone who kind of rose from the ashes, and to lose both your parents so quickly. Look at where she's at now. It's being able to keep pressing on and moving forward. And even whenever, and you can still make, it took you 7 years before you started using it as a platform. But ultimately, it's never too late. Mm-hmm. And you got your whole life ahead of you to really make this a rally cry. So, no, it's really exciting, and it's already taken hold, and you're doing a great job. So thank you for doing that and for speaking to the viewers out there.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this opportunity. I appreciate it. And, certainly reach out to me on social media. I'm pretty much at Lauren Sisler everywhere you can find me. So hit me up if you got questions. I can hopefully direct you in the right path. And, I just encourage you to get out there and share your story. Be who you are, own it, embrace it. It's like you said, it's what makes you unique, and everybody's got a story.
And so thank you for joining us today. You can check us out on our website at www.executiveline.com or our Facebook page at Living Life on Purpose, or it's that / Living Life on Purpose.
Like and share, comment down below, give us your takeaways, or if there's a struggle that you're facing with addiction, reach out, get some help, and we'd love to guide you in the right path.
And when you're talking about just reaching out, like, you don't have to make it public. If you want, you can probably just reach out to any one of us, even on a private message, and we'll do whatever we can to point you in the right direction. So thank you guys. You guys have a wonderful day.